Hey, Rachel.
Yeah, John?
So, do you remember that time that I gave you the pudding that you said was kind of off-putting? Off-putting? Like chalky-ish tasting?
Yeah, totally, because you don't give me dessert very often.
And I told you that my pudding didn't seem chalky and that you should just eat up so I wouldn't feel bad that you weren't eating the pudding?
Yeah, I do.
And then you got real sleepy for a while?
Yeah?
Well, while you were asleep, I made a slight deal with our neighbors, you know, the occultists?
Right.
That are always walking around going, "Hail Satan!"
Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Occultist, right, yeah.
Well, I made a deal with them in order to benefit our podcast and us, to get the esteem that we've been looking for this podcast. We are going to give them one of our cars.
Okay. That seems, I'd give someone our car for a podcast, sure.
The bad news, it's your car.
Oh, man.
And I know you're acting sad, but it's not that sad because you've been wanting to get rid of your car for a while. But I did promise them your replacement car. So you must now keep your current car for the lifetime of your future new car. And the neighbors get the car.
But the podcast gets famous.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
So, that's all to say, this is Open Mic Night of the Living Dead. And of course, we're talking about Rosemary's car. Rosemary's Baby.
The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
You might be going to hell.
Maybe. I didn't know we were debating that today.
Sorry, I didn't know. You're right. That's next week's episode. Man, oh man.
Speaking of next week's episode, we are doing Rosemary's Baby in 2 parts, this being part 1. We're not quite entirely sure how far we're going to get. We're going to keep an eye on the clock, try to make them somewhat equal, hopefully. But
yeah.
There is just so much out there for information on this film that we figured we'd take our time a little bit and put together a couple, hopefully shorter-ish episodes than if we tried to do it all in one.
Yeah. I mean, I think the longest deep dive we've done is maybe 2 hours and 40 minutes, and that felt like a little long. So if we can do a 2-parter in 1.5, this movie certainly deserves at least 3 hours. Not just because of everything that's been written about it, but everything that's in the movie that, which has, of course, inspired all of this scholarship about it. Man, I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, I love this. I've said many times this is one of my favorites. And of course, the lovely voice you've been hearing is that of my legal spouse, Rachel.
Yes, and this is my husband, John.
That's me. We met at an open mic night, thus the title Open Mic Night of the Living Dead. And of course, we have not yet sacrificed or given up any of our children for fame.
Nope.
And
I don't care about cars either, so I'd give both of our cars to the friendly neighborhood occultists.
Too bad we live in a rural area and would make things very difficult very easily because we don't have like Lyft around here.
That's true. It would be a little trickier, but that's okay. We are going to do a deep dive today or over the next 2 weeks and then write a song about the movie.
And perform it for each other.
Perform the song that is written, I should say. Perform it for each other and for you. Since this is a 2-parter, a music will be next week, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
That'll be in Rosemary's Baby Part 2. So if you came here for the music, stick around for the info. I did think it was funny. I don't look at the numbers very much, but I noticed on the YouTube views, which are not high.
Right.
But for The Shining, part 2 was much higher than part 1.
That's fascinating.
which means people listen to the second half, which makes me want to believe that people come for the music.
Oh,
I don't think that's always true. And if you don't, that's fine. I get it. You're here just for the movie talk. If you're here for the music, awesome, but you're not getting it this week.
Not this week. You can go listen to last week's killer demo if you want some music, because that was a really good one. But
yeah, and our horror villain movie draft.
That was a lot of fun last week. But here we are, Rosemary's Baby, deep dive, spoiler warning, lots of spoilers. We're going to spoil absolutely everything.
Including the ending.
Including the ending probably pretty early on. So from now on, everything is fair game. And then second, this movie has some content warning and also discussion-wise for sure, including rape, sexual assault, coercive control, domestic abuse, gaslighting, and all those kinds of things.
Bodily autonomy issues.
Bodily autonomy, forced reproduction.
And then, of course, on top of all of that, the director, Roman Polanski, certainly has a lot of, a certain controversy behind him. And if you don't want to watch this movie because of that, I understand. And if you want to skip this episode because of that, I understand.
We are going to talk about the rape, and we're going to talk about his conviction. And we're going to talk about a little bit about why that is in conversation with this movie. But we also recognize that this is a pretty hot topic, and talking about separating the art from the artist. Can you? Should you? We'll talk about all of that. We don't have any answers, but we will gladly hear from you. If you'd like to join the conversation, please do. But we recognize that, again, this is some dangerous stuff, but that's what horror does.
And that's also not a huge focus of this episode.
No, it'll be part of the whole conversation, but we are going to do our usual deep dive. So that all being said, should I give a summary?
Oh, you've got a summary?
I do have a summary.
Oh, please give it.
I thought that was my job.
It is. I was trying to act surprised, keep it fresh.
Okay. So a young couple moves into a Manhattan apartment building with a dark history. After befriending their overly attentive elderly neighbors, Rosemary becomes pregnant and begins to suspect that everyone around her is part of a conspiracy against her.
What?
That's good, right? Also, quick note, we're going to be saying this a lot. I say Rosemary's Baby, but then sometimes I think some of the characters say Rosemary.
Really?
Instead of Rosemary. Yeah. I think Rosemary, like maybe some of the older. So I'm not sure which one I say.
The people are doing like the transatlantic.
I think it might be. It's some of the older. I want to say
Rosemary.
Rosemary.
I do
like Rosemary.
Rosemarie's Baby.
Oh, that's good. That's great.
That's how I'll be
super helpful. Thank you for yeah. That's our summary. And 2 hours and 17 minutes of that seems like it would be too much, but it's not.
No.
It's not.
So, Rosemarie's Baby.
I don't even know why.
It was released on June 12th, 1968, runtime of 137 minutes. As you mentioned, it was distributed by Paramount Pictures, and therefore you can currently stream it on Paramount Plus if you have that. They're directed by Roman Polanski. The screenplay was written by Roman Polanski and based on the novel Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin, which also it came out in 1967. Seems like back in the old days, they turned some of these around real quick.
Yeah, seriously.
This movie was filmed on a budget of approximately $3.2 million in 1968 money, and its worldwide gross was around $33.4 million. Accounting for inflation, which, there's very little of that since then, but in today's money, the budget would have been around $30.62 million, and this is great. The worldwide gross, according to the calculation I did, was $319,622,643.68.
Great. Thanks for that.
I don't know why it gave it to me down to the cent, but I figured I'd include it.
Great.
So obviously, $33.4 million on a $3.2 million budget is a major commercial success, and it was one of Paramount's biggest hits of the era. It certainly helped to legitimize sophisticated psychological horror. It helped launch the occult horror boom of the 1970s, looking at you, Exorcist. and demonstrated that adult-oriented horror could attract mainstream audiences. And we'll get into it in a little bit here, but also maybe pave the way for prestige or elevated horror.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm saying to the nomenclature.
I know, but we are taught like psychological horror. Certainly, this has some spiritual successors.
In terms of awards and recognition, at least the big ones, Ruth Gordon, who played Minnie Castevet, won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, and Roman Polanski was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, and Ruth Gordon also won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress. And Rosemary's Baby joins our list of films that was added to the National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. It was added back in 2014. Maybe someday we can do like an encore about something about all the movies that we've covered that were on that list.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I don't have a ton of reviews. There are a ton of them out there. Reviews from the time were largely positive. The critics praised Mia Farrow's performance and, of course, Ruth Gordon's performance. The critics also praised the atmosphere, the psychological tension, the realism, Polanski's direction, and his faithful adaptation of Levin's novel. It's often cited as one of the most accurate, what would you say?
Adaptations?
Yeah, accurate adaptations of a novel. Some of the criticism centered on the length of the film, its pacing and slow build, which we'll talk about. There was also criticism around the frustration with Rosemary's inability to uncover the conspiracy sooner. And I don't agree with that whatsoever. Like, she seemed to be onto it, but how do you prove something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, and that was like complaints of that time. I just feel like she did everything that she could.
Yeah. And in terms of certainly positive critical response, one comes from Roger, I always say Roger Ebert. I can't say Roger Ebert on my first try.
That's funny because you say it in like every episode.
Yes. And I say it every time. Ebert said...
Could be part of our first merch run.
Ebert, hey Bert. Come on, Bert, Ebert. Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby is a brooding, macabre film filled with the sense of unthinkable danger. It is a creepy film and a crawly film and a film filled with things that go bump in the night. It is very good. So, he seemed to immediately understand the film's power and that dread could easily substitute gore and spectacle in a horror film. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was imagining making a shirt with Roger Ebert on it as part of our first merch run, if we ever do that.
With Ernie going, Ebert.
Exactly.
Renata Adler of the New York Times was a little less positive about it, but not horribly negative. She said the movie, although it is pleasant, doesn't seem to work on any of its dark or powerful terms. I think this is because it is almost too extremely plausible. One gets very annoyed that they don't catch on sooner. So she disliked aspects of the film that many people find as the effective elements of the film. So
right.
She's like, it is too plausible, so this movie does not work, which seems to be a backwards interpretation, but everybody is, free to have their own opinion.
Some people want to escape into fancy happy land with their movies, and some people want a glimpse of the bleak reality of the human nature.
Yes, and apparently Renata Adler, no offense to her or her family, but apparently she would have caught on to this right quick. Stanley Eichelbaum called it a delicious, nope, he didn't say delicious, he said delightful, a delightful witch's brew. A bit overlong for my taste, but nearly always absorbing, suspenseful, and easier to swallow than Ira Levin's book. Did you read the book for this?
No.
I think I tried to look for it to buy for you one time and did not succeed.
I would like to. I would like to find that and a few other things. He's written a few other books I'm interested in as well.
And of course, the modern reputation today, the film is widely considered one of the greatest horror films ever made, one of the greatest psychological horror films ever made, and one of the most influential horror films ever made. Modern critics frequently cite the paranoia, manipulation, bodily autonomy, and domestic horror as reasons the movie remains relevant, which makes sense. And then I wanted to briefly touch on sort of the cultural legacy of this. Leading up to Rosemary's Baby, again, we're talking 1968, much horror still revolved around monsters and gothic castles, vampires, mad scientists. And of course, we've kind of discussed this before when we were talking about like Halloween and sort of the progression, and Psycho as well, sort of the progression into modern horror. But after Rosemary's Baby, the horror increasingly moved toward psychology, paranoia, domestic settings, social anxiety, ordinary environments. So basically, the threats moving from the castle right into your apartment building. The difference between sort of this and Halloween, we're talking about like a psycho killer, kind of like in Psycho. But in this, it's more of a supernatural occultist type horror that is joining you in your safe space.
Right. What's the movie about the New York apartment building that had all those like crazy people in it that you wouldn't expect to see in it?
Yeah.
You know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's so good, and it's in the 70s, so it would have been after this, but it's got lots of vibes of this.
The Tenant, no. It's got Jeff Goldblum in it.
It does.
It's got
very young Jeff Goldblum, right?
Beverly D'Angelo.
Beverly D'Angelo's in it. Hold on, I'm going to find it that way while you finish up whatever you were saying.
Well, yes. So I was talking about the cultural legacy. The film also effectively created the template for modern pregnancy horror, which I feel less qualified to really speak on, but you obviously later see influences of this in, of course, The Omen, Mother, ! Which is on our list, and we still have never watched it.
The Sentinel.
The Sentinel, yes, that was the movie we were talking about. That's an apartment building, also in New York, and is wacky, and I need to get a copy of that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's considered a great movie, but we really liked it. It's strange. But other pregnancy influenced movies include False Positive, and of course, was Sarah the Bone Woman, which I've never heard of. But
I've heard of that movie a lot, but only it's a woman thing.
It's a woman thing.
It's a woman thing. It's definitely mentioning kind of feminist horror about pregnancy and motherhood and those kinds of things. I've never seen it, but it's on my list.
And of course, it also paves the way for domestic paranoia horror, as I was saying. But the threat is not a monster or a ghost or a creature or even a psycho killer like Norman Bates. The threat is the neighbors, your social systems, your husband, your doctor. And influences can be seen in The Stepford Wives, The Invitation, and Get Out.
Well, and The Stepford Wives was also an Ira Levin book.
Right.
So that's one of those ones that I'm like, ooh, I think, and I read Stepford Wives when I was a teenager, maybe, and The Boys from Brazil, which he also did. But I would love to maybe watch those movies.
Also, this movie paves the way for prestige and elevated horror, whether or not you like the term. Many modern prestige horror films owe something to Rosemary's Baby, like The Witch, Hereditary, and Saint Maud. These all have the characteristics of the slow burn, the focus on the psychology of its characters, social themes, and of course, character-first storytelling, which we certainly don't always see in some of our favorite slashers necessarily.
Right.
And of course, horror without gore. This film demonstrates that dread, suggestion, and implication can be every bit as effective as explicit violence.
And of course, modern elevated horror has all of the tension of Rosemary's Baby plus really intense violence all of a sudden, right? And I think that's...
At least sometimes.
I'm thinking Hereditary, Midsommar, those kinds of movies where they kind of hit you with both. Because when it's combined, it's even crazier. But
yes. No, absolutely. Well, in terms of the context of the horror and sort of genre films in general at that time, 1968 was a kind of a pivotal year in genre film history. Along with Rosemary's Baby, you get Night of the Living Dead, Planet of the Apes, and 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Huh.
So, modern horror, modern science fiction, and sort of social commentary were all evolving rapidly at that time. It really is kind of a turning point in some of those genres. I must admit, though, I have not seen Planet of the Apes, the original one, you damn dirty apes.
I have seen that, but it was many years ago.
In terms of the horror films you could have seen at the theater that year, we had Night of the Living Dead, Witchfinder General, The Devil Rides Out, Targets, Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, Curse of the Crimson Altar, The Blood Beast Terror, and The Strange World of Coffin Joe.
Oh, I don't know any of those except the last one, which I've seen.
Is that the one we watched?
It's not, but I've watched it because I got that for my birthday last year. It was the Coffin Joe box set after we watched it with Joe Bob.
Coffin Joe Bob?
Yes. And The Strange World of Coffin Joe, I think actually that was the only one that was streaming before I got the box set. So definitely a weird one. Very different than this. Very surreal.
Yeah, no, we're not saying that these are anything like this movie. And in terms of the non-horror movie, like I said, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Planet of the Apes, Bullitt, which is Bullitt, The Lion in Winter, Oliver, Funny Girl, Romeo and Juliet, of course, starring our girl from Black Christmas, Olivia Hussey, Once Upon a Time in the West, and The Producers. So, a lot to see out at your local theater in 1968. What can you tell me about the ratings for this film?
Well, in alignment with kind of the legacy that you've just described, the ratings are fairly high. It is an 8.0 on IMDb. Rotten Tomatoes, you've got 97% tomato meter, 92% popcorn. Letterboxd, it's a solid 4.3. Personal, I wrote down 4.5, but I actually think this is a 5-star for me.
Wow.
I think this is up there with The Thing. Because for me, 5 stars is perfect for me, I think is what I say. 5-star. Mine, masterpiece or a film that shaped me, will always watch, perfectly crafted. And I think, and then 4.5 is fantastic, almost perfect, would watch again happily, exceptionally crafted. So I am kind of stuck between a 4.5 and a 5, but I think this is up there. I think I would watch it again right now, which is really unusual. I don't like rewatching movies all that much. But this one I would watch again right away.
Yeah, I list it as a 9 out of 10.
I see now I'm thinking about it again and I'm like maybe a 4.5 because it doesn't have that like little extra flavor, mostly because the first time I saw it, I think, was with you 2 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you have that?
Oh, the date. I have the date that we watched it.
And I think the first time I watched it was not long before we watched it.
I think you're right.
Actually, this might be one that I tried to show at a high school horror movie marathon.
Oh, man.
Mistake. That and, I don't know, we've talked about it on other episodes. Yeah. I threw like 2 or 3 horror movie marathons at least in high school and usually included one bad choice.
Yeah.
For that setting.
January 27th, 2024 is when we first watched this. And I rated it a 5 then, which is why I think I went back in this time around and was like, now that I have my more established rating system, I think it might actually be a 4.5, but you'll just have to follow me on Letterboxd to figure out which one I landed on.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever rated anything a 10, ever. So I don't know. Maybe when I die, you can go through all my ratings and adjust them.
Okay.
And make my highest rating the 10 and then base everything on the scale from there.
Top of the list. I've gone with a 4.5 for this because I think 5s are for my favorite movies that I have an even deeper, more emotional connection to. I really love this movie more than any other movie, I think, almost that we've watched. It's really good.
We also, in terms of suggestions for our listeners, we have a 3-tier scale.
Oh, yeah.
That we created back in episode 1, even before we were giving our own ratings.
Right.
1 is terrible, trash.
Forget about it.
And not the kind of trash that you want to watch. Like the kind of trash we're saying, don't watch.
Right.
And I'll be surprised if we ever get to a 1.
Yeah.
I don't know how we would ever get there. But 2 is like the general, almost all horror movies. Check it out if you're a horror fan.
If it sounds interesting to you, you should watch it.
Interesting to very good.
Right. And then there's 3s.
Just like this movie.
Like this movie is a 3. If that wasn't obvious, you should watch this movie.
Yeah, this is a seminal work in the horror genre.
And not just because it's so important. Like, I think sometimes I feel like I didn't watch this movie for a really long time. And I think in part it was because I knew I should, because I knew it influenced so many of the movies I did like. But I was put off by the fact that it was made in 1968. It's kind of old and it's a little slow. Our kid wouldn't enjoy this yet.
No.
She would hate this. But I think hopefully someday she will, when she's able to slow down a little bit, because it isn't slow, even though it should be. It's kind of like The Exorcist.
It's somehow slow,
way.
but always captivating. So
Every scene just had me pulled in.
yeah, you're in it the whole time.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask before we move on, because, well, this time that we watched it, we ended up having to interrupt it, right? We watched it over 2 nights for whatever reason. You were tired or there was company or something.
Yeah.
Either way, it didn't work. We couldn't get through 137 minutes in one night. We would have liked to. But we split it up. But we were just trying to figure out why we like it so much and why we think it's so good. And I'm still not sure I've landed on a place, even after doing all this research and understanding kind of technically why it's so good.
Yeah, I think it's just it captures something real and true and deeply terrifying, and it is incredibly compelling.
Yeah.
And we'll try to figure out why over the next however many hours it takes us to get through this movie. But I think that's it for our little introduction and distribution and reception. Let's make a movie.
Let's do it.
Let's make a movie. We'll make sure that it's spooky. I sure hope that it's groovy. Let's make a movie.
All right.
Okay.
We're making a movie.
We're making a movie.
And I always start I always start by talking poorly. No, I always start with some of the key personnel, and we're going to start with the director and screenwriter, Roman Polanski. And of course, sort of at the end of this section, we'll talk about his crime. It's not alleged, it's a conviction. But his background is very interesting. And I just want to say at the beginning of this, I'm not saying any of this to mitigate what he did or to justify anything, but he had a very troubled youth, and it's just very interesting for the time. And I think it also shapes his filmmaking. So I'm speaking to all of that on that basis. Does that make sense?
Yes.
He was born on August 18th in 1933 in Paris, France. And his parents were Polish. They returned to Poland in 1936, right at the beginning of World War II. And as their family was of mostly Jewish descent, they were sent to the Krakow ghetto. His parents were both captured by the Nazis and sent to separate concentration camps. And his mother died at Auschwitz, and his father did survive the concentration camp imprisonment. And Polanski witnessed his father being captured by the Nazis at age 7, and he was sort of left on his own, and he reportedly wandered the Polish countryside, pretending to be a Roman Catholic boy visiting relatives, and he would hide in places in barns and stuff like that. He would eat whatever he could find or steal. And at one point, he was severely beaten, which left him with a fractured skull. It was nearly fatal. But in 1945, he was reunited with his father, which would be age 12. So from 7 to 12, he was kind of just on his own, trying to survive in the Polish countryside with the Nazis running around. So obviously, these experiences profoundly shaped his worldview, as they would for anyone. He would later go on to study film at Lodz Film School. And I'm laughing because all of these letters have the L has a line through it in a place. The O has an accent. The Z has an accent. So I'm very confident I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. But it's Lodz. Look it up. You look at it. You tell me in the comments how you would pronounce it, because that's really easy in comments, is to tell somebody how to pronounce something. But it is one of Europe's most respected film schools. His early breakout film, the English title, it was a Polish language film, but the title is Knife in the Water. And it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film.
His first film?
Yes, his feature film debut. And I guess it was really important at the time because it was one of the first post-war Polish films that didn't focus on the war, though I think there might have been aspects of it. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it. It sounds like it could be interesting. He followed that up with 3 English language films that he made in the UK: Repulsion, Cul-de-sac, and The Fearless Vampire Killers. And I've seen Repulsion. You should probably see it too, Rachel.
I ran into it while researching for this film. It's kind of part of a trilogy of films that he did, right?
I'm not sure.
That all have to do with like neighbors and stuff. There was Repulsion, Rosemary's Baby, and then one other.
Maybe Cul-de-sac.
I think Cul-de-sac is the other, and it all kind of they all connect to each other. So I saw that in a few places when I was doing research, that those 3 films together all kind of explore some of the same ideas.
Yeah. And The Fearless Vampire Killers looks kind of fun too. He's in it. He's also done plenty of acting as well in films. But he directed and co-stars in The Fearless Vampire Killers with his then-wife, Sharon Tate. More on that later. Obviously, after Rosemary's Baby, he directed Macbeth, Chinatown, The Tenant, The Ninth Gate. He won the Oscar for Best Director of The Pianist in 2002. And for reasons we'll get into just momentarily, he did not appear to accept that award. It was accepted on his behalf by the presenter, Harrison Ford. And he's directed a lot of movies since Rosemary's Baby. I decided in my own kind of protest to not name any beyond 1977 except The Ninth Gate, just because it's kind of in this genre, and The Pianist because of the award. He's directed many other films. His most recent was in 2023. And like you said, especially those earlier films, the trilogy, I guess.
I think it was The Tenant was the other one. So it was Repulsion, Rosemary's Baby, and The Tenant.
That makes sense. Although Cul-de-sac sounds also like...
It does sound like it. You're right, which is why I was kind of like, sure, that sounds right. No, I think The Tenant is kind of the third in that.
But the common themes that were already present in Repulsion and Cul-de-sac before Rosemary's Baby were the paranoia, isolation, psychological instability, and enclosed spaces. And so Rosemary's Baby wasn't like a huge dramatic shift in filmmaking for him. It just represented a continuation of interests he had already explored, like The Apartments also, on top of that, like you're saying.
I actually have it in my notes and didn't realize. The Apartment Trilogy is what it's called.
Oh, interesting. It's weird I didn't see that.
Right.
But you're so thorough.
I am very thorough. I just write down these notes as I run into them. Did you want to talk about the next part or the...
How did you know that was the next part? You don't have my notes, but you're correct.
Well, because you said you weren't going to talk about any of his newer films in protest, so I figured you would pretty much reach the end of the part we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
That part.
I'm either way.
Cool. Yeah, I had taken some notes on it because I wasn't sure if we should discuss it here or in themes because, you know, spoiler alert again, but like the themes of reproductive coercion and rape are pretty strong here. So it has to be in conversation with his history. But in 1977, Polanski was arrested for the statutory rape of a 13-year-old girl. He pled guilty to unlawful sex with a minor, but then fled the U.S. before sentencing. He still has outstanding U.S. and international arrest warrants, but has never been extradited because he went to France, which doesn't extradite.
Like you said, it certainly touches on the themes, which we can talk about more when we get there. And certainly there's plenty of information out there if you want to learn more about this, but it does raise the interesting discussion that you were talking about of art versus artist, which is obviously very relevant today, especially after the Me Too movement and all of that. And I don't I don't think we're here to present any answers.
I mean, I don't think you can separate this movie from the fact that Polanski kind of committed some of these unethical acts that are being criticized. Are they being criticized? Are they being noticed? And I think it's part of a wider conversation about Hollywood and the exploitation of young people, particularly young women, that I think Levin's novel and this film are both pointing out directly, that how completely women, especially at this time, were kind of controlled. And then Polanski, you cannot separate that. You can't talk about this movie without talking about that, I don't think. But obviously we're talking about the movie. We're not rejecting the art because the artist did something terrible. And I don't think there is an answer for that question. For some people there is. And I think for everybody, like all art, you got to make up your own mind.
It is trickier when it's like the director who's helming the ship, but it is not his material. And that's not to parse or justify anything. But I think one of the problems sometimes when art is set aside because of the horrible misdeeds of someone involved in that project is that all of a sudden, all of the other artists who contributed lose out. And, from the acting to the cinematography to the, the original novel that apparently is very, very close to this story, all of those people contributed to what really is a horror masterpiece, for better or worse.
Totally. And I think that in this particular case, like sometimes what the person did that was bad doesn't have anything to do with the movie that was made or the show that was made. So there are plenty of other people in Hollywood who have been called out as abusers, and their work didn't necessarily portray the kind of thing they were then accused of doing. Like the fact that this does means that you really can't separate it, that it speaks to it. And maybe that changed some of the ways in which he treated the material. I also think it's a really clear example of how people are complicated and complex, and that art comes from that complexity and us trying to figure out who we are and what to look like. I mean, I think the portrayal of abuse and coercion in this film we're not supposed to be siding with Guy and the Castavets. Like, no. Rosemary is the protagonist, right? So what does it say that someone who was an abuser of women, a person in power who used that power to hurt somebody else, what does it say that his protagonist is a woman who's trying to escape and cannot? Like, I don't know. I don't know what it says, but it says something.
And we can't get in people's minds, obviously. And
right.
This was filmed about 10 years before, he was arrested and convicted and all of that. And I don't, who's to say what if there were any other instances of...
There have been other allegations. And so, is there a pattern? Potentially, yes. But there's plenty of other directors, some of whom and producers and actors, some of whom have been accused and found guilty. Others who have not, but have really bad reputations. Some of who make movies I really, really enjoy. So I think it's out there. We have to acknowledge it. And I think that as we continue, that does kind of cast a bit of a shadow, or just gives us another filter through which to kind of look at the film.
Well, and also the last thing I'll say, which is not entirely related, but it is in part, is that from like a criminal crime committing standpoint, I do believe, in rehabilitation of people in a large way. It's trickier when it comes to crimes like this. It is such a horrific crime. In my mind, usually when I'm thinking of rehabilitation, I'm thinking of somebody who might have committed some sort of violent crime, hurt somebody, but
he fled rehabilitation.
Right. So that's what I was getting to.
Yeah, sorry.
So that makes it doubly.
Right. And yes, he pled guilty, but it was in exchange for no jail time. And when he found out he might have to do jail time, then he left. So he was like, oh, I'll have some consequences, but not the ones I don't want.
Right.
And that is enough for me. Like, I'm not a fan, and I'm not an apologist for him in any way.
No.
But I love this movie.
And I guess I had known it at one point, but I was surprised about, the Oscar win for Best Director of The Pianist in 2002.
Yeah, me too.
But I guess I'm not on the Academy. I get the invitations every year, like, please join the Academy. And I'm like, I don't have time to watch all these
I'm so
movies.
busy.
Anyway, we also recently talked about Stanley Kubrick.
Yes, we
in
did.
our Shining episode, and I wanted to draw a couple of comparisons between Polanski's direction style and Kubrick's direction styles, at least as I understand them, and I'm not going to go
cool.
in depth on the Kubrick stuff. You can listen to that in the Shining episode, but both directors were known for perfectionism, extensive preparation, visual storytelling, psychological tension. They were also known both for multiple takes, Kubrick famously so, careful camera placement, and the interest in isolation and paranoia. You see that in a lot of both of their films. And they both preferred controlling as many aspects of the production as possible and guiding audience emotion through filmmaking technique rather than exposition. The difference really lies in sort of what kind of perfectionism they're demonstrating.
You're making yourself laugh, and I don't know why.
I'm making myself confused, and I'm laughing about that.
Okay.
But Kubrick's reputation centers on technical precision and exhaustive coverage, endless experimentation, and extraordinary high take counts, though, as we delved into in The Shining, maybe not as high in some instances as some people reported. But the real thing that it broke down to with Kubrick, we talked about this, was the first thing was he wanted people to know their stuff inside out. If you're the actor, know all your lines, top to bottom. Number two, is it truthful? Is your performance, does it seem true? And number three was interesting. So he wasn't necessarily going into any specific performance looking for a specific performance. He was looking for those three things. Number three being interesting once you were accurate and true. So he kind of behaved like an engineer perfecting machine and not necessarily looking for a specific outcome. Now, Polanski was also demanding, but his focus, at least according to what I've read, it tended more toward performance, psychology, human behavior, subtle emotional reactions, and social discomfort. And so it sounded, from my understanding, and I could be incorrect, but it sounded like he was more looking for a specific performance, which I think a lot of people thought that about Kubrick, but it seems like that was not the case.
So Kubrick was a perfectionist, but he was looking for whatever performance would appear in the moment and was very much kind of going with the flow. And so he had an idea about the circumstances around the performance, but then allowed the performance to develop organically, whereas Polanski was like, this is the performance I want. You do it till you get it there.
Right.
Yeah. Can I just tell you real quick what this discussion about directors is making me think? Is about a conversation with our teenager about dating and artists and how artists are just, whether it's a director or a musician or an author. And I'm thinking about all the authors and musicians I've known, like, man, they are never simple, boring people. But if you're lucky, you find one that you like to make music with, then you make something cool together. But I'm just thinking about both these guys. I'm like, man, they must have been really hard to be in a relationship with.
And screws loose.
And screws loose too. I mean, but you have to make art, right? Like, there's got to be something that gets you to pull on those heartstrings. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are very few creators who create from entirely a happy, stable baseline. Yes, agreed. Even if, I think there are plenty of artists who have found a stable life and happiness, but they're still usually creating from that point, because that's what art is. It's an expression of self. So, but yeah, just to summarize, Kubrick's perfection often feels technical, while Polanski's often feels behavioral. Both of those kind of land in the same place, discomfort. I do think Kubrick's kind of lands into a bit more of a surreal area, right?
Yeah, and this is really the only Polanski film I've watched in detail, so I can't compare it necessarily. But just thinking about The Shining versus Rosemary's Baby, I think The Shining does have, it's like wider and vaster, and Rosemary's Baby's like intimate and close and real, like very realistic.
Yeah, if you're comparing those two movies specifically, which I guess is what we're doing because those are the two that we've covered, obviously The Shining is a lot more out there. Even though they kind of, to me, they have a similar vibe.
Yes, totally. Also true.
I wanted to touch briefly on a couple other key personnel here. Real briefly, Ira Levin, the author of the book, the novel Rosemary's Baby, was born in August of 1929 in New York City and was a novelist, playwright, and songwriter, and known for, he's written endless things, but known for A Kiss Before Dying, Rosemary's Baby, The Stepford Wives, The Boys from Brazil, and Death Trap. Did you read The Boys from Brazil just because it had Brazil in the title?
No.
I don't believe you.
But that is pretty funny. I think I did read it in high school. And Death Trap, did you say?
Yeah.
Isn't that Charles Bronson film?
Death Wish.
Damn it. I was just looking at his Letterboxd page.
I'm still hoping you're going to do a video on 10 to Midnight because...
Okay.
Who do you think that's about? I'll give you a hint. You. If you haven't seen 10 to Midnight and you love ridiculous one-liners delivered by Charles Bronson.
Yeah, that is pretty good. I'm just remembering some of them. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just want to go through all of them now, but there's not enough context. Check that out. In terms of Levin's creative style, he excelled at simple premises, ordinary settings. Can I also tell you that a large part of the time I was doing my research, I thought Ira Levin was a woman. I don't know why. Also excelled at hidden conspiracies and paranoia beneath everyday life. Panera.
I know you.
He loves sandwiches.
It's a tough time with the words.
I always do. It's because there's so many of them. Percentage-wise, I'm pretty good. You're slightly better. But his horror rarely comes from monsters. It comes from institutions, systems, and people you trust. The novel was published in 1967 and was an immediate bestseller, which probably led to why it was fast-tracked into a screenplay. The adaptation, like I said, was considered one of the most faithful horror adaptations ever made. Polanski retained its plot structure, dialogue, scenes, character beats, and the ending. So he didn't really reinvent the story whatsoever. He just translated it for film, which I think is pretty awesome.
It is pretty great. Makes me curious to read the book at some point.
And then another important name attached to this film is producer William Castle, who he's dead, but he still is a famous director in his own right. He was a director and producer. He directed films from like the late 30s or early 40s into the 70s. He had several with Vincent Price. He's known, of course, for directing House on Haunted Hill, which we watched pretty recently. The Tingler, which sounds awesome. The original 13 Ghosts, and a movie called Straight Jacket, which I added here because for some reason I thought it sounded interesting. But he directed over like 60 movies. So there's a long list, but a lot of them are in like the 5.5 to 6 range on IMDb. So none of them are like huge movies in the genre, but it sounds like a lot of them are pretty fun. He specialized in theatrical gimmicks. Wasn't there some sort of theatrical gimmick with House on Haunted Hill when it came out? I can't remember.
They had like a ghost like fly out at the audience at one, I think. Yeah. I
think he was famous for that kind of thing and audience participation and promotional stunts. Who knows what he would have done for Smile? Would he had him at baseball games smiling? Probably. That sounds like a William Castle kind of thing. William Castle really wanted to direct this movie, which based on, the ratings of all his movies, I think it's good that he didn't, but who knows? Maybe it would have been cool. He acquired the property and championed the project. So he was really the one sort of spearheading this movie being made and wanted to direct it. But instead, Paramount selected Polanski and Castle remained on as the producer. So really, the man responsible for bringing the project to Hollywood ultimately became far overshadowed by its director.
Oh, man. And that guy had an ego because you can't be a producer or director without one of those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was really Robert Evans, who at the time was the head of production at Paramount, is considered to be one of the key figures responsible for bringing Polanski to Hollywood, because this was his first American film, as far as I can tell, I think. And also Evans supported the adaptation and helped shepherd the project to completion. So...
Did you see that William Castle had a cameo in the movie?
I did not.
He is the man standing outside the phone booth.
Oh, I knew that.
Oh, I did not.
But I did not see it in this research, so I wasn't reminded. I knew that it was somebody. William Castle, waiting to make the phone call. But that's all I have at the moment. Some of my other key personnel will show up in Vibe Check. So why don't you tell me about the cast?
Sure, the cast, which we have touched on, mostly characters so far, and not so much the cast, but Mia Farrow as Rosemary Woodhouse. She is super famous. I think that's fair to say. She was born Maria de Lord Villiers Farrow in 1945 in L.A. She's the daughter of a film director, John Farrow, and actress Maureen O'Sullivan. And she was best known as Jane, or her mom was best known as Jane in the 1930s Tarzan films. So her mom was...
I've definitely heard of Maureen O'Sullivan.
She was childhood friends with Liza Minnelli and Candice Bergen. So she was kind of, part of this Hollywood royalty. She was in a soap opera, Peyton Place, from 64 to 66. And that's where she really got noticed. So right when she was, 19, 20. She married Frank Sinatra in 1966 when she was 21 and he was 50. She has written an autobiography, so there's a lot of stuff in there, or maybe a memoir that has a lot of information. So you can find a ton of stuff about them.
What's the difference between a memoir and an autobiography?
I just had this conversation with one of my students, but an autobiography is kind of a historical telling of your life from beginning to end. So it kind of tells you everything. And a memoir is parts of your life kind of connected by a theme. So you could write multiple memoirs, but really only one autobiography. But that's kind of that's how I think about them separately.
So like memoirs could just be stories.
Right. Like a memoir could be a collection of stories, or it could be like tracing one part of your life. And that could go from your childhood to your old age. But like if I were to write about like my medical journey, right? Or my disability or whatever, and trace that throughout my life, it wouldn't be a direct telling of everything in my life. It would be specifically the ways in which that appeared. But then I could write another one about, I don't know, plants or something. I love plants.
Bestseller.
Anyway, Mia Farrow has written some memoirs, a memoir, at least one. But she did marry Frank Sinatra when she was 21 and he was 50. And she accepted the role in this movie despite his opposition. The shoot ran over schedule and it conflicted with Sinatra's film, The Detective, and she had been cast opposite him in The Detective. He was so opposed to this, he ended up serving her divorce papers when she was on the set. So as you watch her kind of deteriorate over the course of the film, a lot of that was probably related to actual stress and not just acting. She was replaced in The Detective by Jacqueline Bisset because of that. And then producer Robert Evans showed her a rough cut of her performance to convince her to stay. She almost quit, but she ended up staying on. And so Rosemary's Baby and The Detective were released on the same day. So really complicated stuff going on in the background of this filming. She did receive BAFTA and Golden Globe nominations for the performance in the movie, but she was not nominated for the Oscar. Ira Levin dedicated the sequel novel Son of Rosemary to her in 1997. She, personal life-wise, her second husband was conductor Andre Previn. They were married from 1970 to 79. She also had a long relationship with Woody Allen. Speaking of more controversy, she has 14 children, both biological and adopted. So she has had a really long, interesting, complicated life, and she is a fascinating woman. But that is Mia Farrow. We will talk about Rosemary when we get to characters later on. But she is part of what is so compelling about this movie.
Yeah.
So that's Mia Farrow. John Cassavetes. I don't know how to say that in American.
Cassavetes?
Cassavetes. John Cassavetes plays Guy Woodhouse. He was born in 1929 in New York City to Greek-American parents, died in 1989 at age 60 of cirrhosis. He was called perhaps the most influential American director of the last half century by The New Yorker. He directed a bunch of movies from the 50s through the 80s. He directed Shadows in 1959, Faces, Husbands, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, and Gloria. He also was an actor in Edge of the City and in The Dirty Dozen. He got an Oscar nomination for that. So this is, again, these are professionals making this film. He was initially hesitant about doing the film because he didn't like genre films, but Polanski convinced him to. Funnily enough, Robert Redford was the first choice for Guy by Polanski, which would have been a very different film. I feel like Redford would be hard to believe he was a struggling actor.
Fair.
Because he's a handsome fella. Jack Nicholson was also briefly considered. They were buddies.
Because he was in Chinatown, which Polanski directed
right
in the early 70s.
Right. There's a Criterion essay on this film, and it pointed out which I thought was interesting, the dramatic irony of Cassavetes, the great champion of actors, playing a man who sells his wife's body for career advancement. So here's a guy who is, a straight arrow actor, I guess, actor-director, kind of a champion for actors, playing kind of a scummy actor. We've got Ruth Gordon as Minnie Castevet.
Ooh.
Wow. She was born in 1896.
Holy smokes. I think that at least the first person we've noted who was born pre-20th century.
There's a few people in Psycho.
That makes sense,
But yeah. And then died August 28th, 1985. So she was 89.
Oh, I was like, she was 112.
You're so good at math. She had her Broadway debut at age 19. So she was a lifelong actress. She was a celebrated stage actress for decades. She also co-wrote screenplays with her husband and received a few Oscar nominations for her writing. And she won the Oscar for supporting actress for this role in 1968. So the way Polanski cast the supporting roles was by drawing character sketches, and then Paramount Casting matched the sketches to the actors. So, which I thought was interesting because we don't always hear about that. And that's how Gordon was cast, that she matched. And that actually goes to what you were saying about Polanski's directing, where he has like a vision for what he wants, and then he makes the actors fulfill it, right?
It's interesting. There was a time in Hollywood, I'm not sure where I didn't do the research, but there was a time in Hollywood where it was much more like the studio system in terms of all of that. And then there was New Hollywood. So I wonder where that fits in, because now you would do things through like casting agents, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like, because back in the studio system, I think people and it's not that there aren't some people who have contracts with certain studios, but that's kind of how it worked back in the day. The studio had these actors available, I think.
I think so too, but I don't know enough about it. And that's because neither of us ever went to film school.
Tell me about it in the comments. You think that's what they teach you at film school?
I think you'd learn the history of film in Hollywood. I feel like you would learn a lot of context.
Hopefully.
Oh, Tony Curtis has an uncredited voice cameo. He's the actor Donald Baumgart, but he presented Ruth Gordon with her Oscar.
So he was the guy who lost his sight.
The guy who lost his sight,
and you just hear him quietly on the phone.
Yep.
Father of Laurie Strode.
That's true. Ooh, nice connection. Ruth Gordon went on to Harold and Maude in 1971, Every Which Way But Loose in 1978, and she hosted Saturday Night Live in 1977.
I want to see that episode.
I was about to, that's why I mentioned it, because I knew you would. So she's a really cool lady and did an amazing job, obviously, in this film. We've got Sidney Blackmer as Roman Castevet, another veteran stage and film actor, decades of Broadway credits. I think that the acting chops of these supporting actors is part of what makes this such an incredible film. He plays Roman with no camp. No, he's very straight, right? Like, what a great performance.
I feel like you could almost do like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead kind of movie for this, just of the Cassavetes perspective. And obviously there wouldn't be kind of the mystery aspect of it, but just like their scheming and deviance and all of that would be.
Oh, yeah.
And the actors are just so good. It would be entertaining, I think.
That's a cool idea. We've got Ralph Bellamy as Dr. Abraham Saperstein, another long career as a Hollywood character actor. Maurice Evans, who is a British stage and screen actor, played Hutch. Poor Hutch. And then Charles Grodin as Dr. Hill. This was his feature film debut. And of course, he had a long comedy career. What show was he on that I recognize him from
This is
in
your
the
job.
90s? I know. And I didn't write it down. I'm looking here. I wrote it in my personal notes, but I didn't write it down in my study notes. But yeah, Charles Grodin, he was in some like Friday night. It was some...
Boy Meets World?
It might have been Boy Meets
No,
World.
it's
No,
not.
it was not Boy Meets World. It was something older, something in the 80s, some like sitcom type thing.
Oh.
He
was
like the dad
he
in
was
something.
in
Oh, he's in
tons-
Beethoven.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. It took me a second to get there.
Yes.
Because when I saw him in this movie, I was like, oh, and all I can think is Cranky Dad. And it's from the movie Beethoven, which I saw a million, billion, gajillion times. But yeah, he was super famous in a lot of stuff in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and stuff that is rated much higher than Beethoven.
Yeah, but that's what I know him from. So
Me too.
let's see. Patsy Kelly played Laura Louise, who's just a funny, funny lady. She's a former child star and a beloved stage comedian. So, I mean, whenever you look at these really classic films, the cast is just full of really good people. Victoria Vetri she's in the credits as Angela Dorian, but she actually was a model, a Playboy centerfold. And she was in When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, which I think we should probably see in 1970.
Which character did she play?
She played Terry. Sorry. I thought
Terry.
I said that. I might not have. Yeah, poor Teresa.
D'Onofrio.
And then Tony Curtis. So the reason Polanski wanted to use Tony Curtis, he wanted the voice to be recognizable enough that Farrow would feel disoriented trying to place it. So he wanted her to like know it, but not know who it was. And then also Sharon Tate is believed to have been one of the uncredited extras in the background of Young People Only Party.
Oh.
So that is unconfirmed. And we didn't really talk about this very much, but of course, Sharon Tate was Roman Polanski's wife.
And I've got a whole section for this.
Never mind, then we'll talk about that in a little bit. I wasn't sure because we had touched base.
At the end of Murder Mayhem, so probably next episode.
Right. We'll
I've
talk
got
about
myths as well.
Talk about Sharon. Ooh, Murder, Mayhem, and Myths. I like that. That worked out real nice. But just to whet your appetite, of course, Sharon Tate was one of the victims of the Manson family murders. Not too soon after this came out.
Nope.
Yeah, that's all I've got for cast. I do, sometimes when we watch these old movies, I feel like there's just this whole context that I'm missing because this is from 1968. So we don't have all of the stars of the 30s, 40s, and 50s to kind of draw on that knowledge. But man, can you see their skill on screen, even if we're not familiar with their previous work?
So strong and captivating.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me tell you a little bit about production here.
Please do.
Principal photography took place in 1967. It was mostly filmed on Paramount sound stages in Los Angeles. All the interiors are sets, with the location work done in New York City, obviously. Specifically the exteriors of the famous apartment building, the Dakota. And filming finished in December of 1967. And I'm going to get back more into some of that in a minute. But
I bet.
as you were mentioning in terms of Mia Farrow's divorce, production exceeded the original budget and ran behind schedule. The reasons are attributed to Polanski's perfectionism, his repeated takes, his precise blocking and visual experimentation. And some reports indicate that certain shots approached 50 takes. But as we know, some of these reports can get blown out of proportion, so who knows. But it does sound like he was a hefty take taker. Take taker.
Take taker.
That came out of my mouth before it even entered my brain. So the apartment building in the movie is called the Bramford. And in reality, the exteriors were the Dakota, which is located at 1 West 72nd Street in Manhattan. It was built in 1884. I used to work at a restaurant on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, on the corner of 74th and Amsterdam. So only really a couple of blocks here from the Dakota. And as a building, the Dakota is known for its Gothic architecture, its dramatic appearance, its historical reputation, and distinctive archway entrance. However, so many people thought for years that the Bramford was, intended to be the Dakota. It was just sort of the fictional representation of the Dakota as it is depicted that way in the film. However, reality is a bit more nuanced. Evidence actually suggests that the original literary inspiration for the Bramford may have been a building called Alwyn Court, which is located a little further downtown at 180 West 58th Street. That building was built in 1909 and is known for its ornate French Renaissance design. It's decorative terracotta. Delicious. I love terracotta. What am I confusing it with? Doesn't matter. Elaborate sculptural detailing.
Panna cotta?
Yeah. But Ira Levin reportedly lived at Alwyn Court when he was writing the novel, and Levin's son later stated that Alwyn Court was indeed the original inspiration. So, at the end of the day, the novel's Bramford and the film's Bramford are actually two different buildings, though only separated by about 20 New York City blocks or less. I also did some research. I was interested to see what Rosemary's apartment might cost today.
Oh, cool.
Obviously, an exact equivalent is pretty impossible to determine, but a comparable luxury pre-war apartment on Central Park West today would likely, if you were going to purchase it, would cost anywhere from $5 million for like a small apartment to 15 plus million. Or if you were renting sort of a similar apartment, it would roughly cost anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000+ a month. And the interesting thing is that the apartment, obviously, it's pretty luxurious, but it is presented as like attainable success in this movie, right? Because he's
a struggling actor and she doesn't work.
I mean, he does have jobs, but yeah. Today, apartments like this obviously represent extraordinary wealth. That's where I'm moving when this blows up, once this car deal pays off with the neighbors.
Perfect. New York City.
I also did a little research. I was interested because the film uses the Dakota entrance, kind of the famous archway and courtyard areas, specifically sort of in the beginning when Rosemary and Guy are coming in to see the apartment for the first time. And it can't be confidently stated that a specific shot shows sort of the location where John Lennon was murdered, but he was murdered in the entryway of the Dakota in 1980, so 12 years after this film. So I just thought that was interesting, all these connections, and we'll get more into some of these in the myths section later. In terms of the apartment set construction, again, the interiors were not Dakota interiors. They were purpose-built Paramount sets by production designer Richard Silbert. He was born in 1928 in Brooklyn, and he was one of the most respected production designers of his era. He designed over 50 movies and notably designed previous to Rosemary's Baby. He did production design for Baby Doll, The Manchurian Candidate, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. He would later go on to do production design again for Polanski in Chinatown, but he also did the movie Dick Tracy. Did you ever see that? The 1990 movie Dick Tracy?
Yeah.
I watched it a lot, I think. I used to pretend I was Dick Tracy. I would do...
Not surprised.
A lot of that movie's like dark and dingy, and I would like pretend that the furnace room in the basement where I grew up was like the back streets in that movie.
That's fair. That room is pretty shady.
And then he also did the production design for My Best Friend's Wedding in 1996, just to give you a wide scope of some of his work. The challenge for Silbert as the production designer in this movie was to create an apartment that feels aspirational, stylish, and desirable, while it also gradually becomes a prison, surveillance space, or a trap, all without significantly changing the environment itself. In terms of the technical aspects, the sets were designed to allow wall removal, to allow for unusual camera placement, the long sight lines that you get in some of the shots, the hallway compositions, and the doorway framing, because obviously there's a lot of that in this film, and I eat that stuff up. Maybe I'm a sucker, but I like some like deep hallway shots.
Yeah, there were a lot of those.
And the apartment geography is really interesting. I've always kind of thought about this when we watch the movie. The apartment feels spacious and cramped simultaneously. Also, the geography is like a little bit confusing. And I don't think it's the same as in The Shining, where it's kind of like sometimes intentionally impossible to sort of create the dis-ease. But it's similar in this movie that discomfort has created like, I think if you really watch closely, you could map out their apartment, but it is not clear, sort of the exact layout, at least to me.
Totally. I find it very confusing.
And so while Rosemary is surrounded by these big, spacious rooms, she also feels trapped. I have a few production anecdotes. One of them was about the Frank Sinatra divorce papers. You covered that. But there's the scene where Mia Farrow's crossing traffic.
Yep.
And that's her really crossing a busy New York street. It's not like a closed set. It sounds like Polanski was the only one who was willing to take the shot himself. So he operated camera handheld and followed her through traffic.
Yeah, and he told her to do it because he said, nobody will hit a pregnant woman.
Well,
it sounds kind of like he pushed her into it a little bit.
Did you see about the relationship between John Cassavetes and Polanski?
No, I didn't.
They butted heads, apparently.
Oh.
It was really over creative tensions. Cassavetes preferred spontaneity and improvisation, and I guess in several of his works leading up to this, he was able to exercise his creativity that way more. But as we discussed previously, Polanski preferred repetition, precision, and control. So they reportedly clashed over performance methods. There's also some question about Mia Farrow's nudity in this film. There's some rumors that some of the nudity was a body double, but that's never been confirmed, at least in my research. It's just interesting that some of it would be a body double and then some is definitely not.
I didn't see anything about it.
Anyway, that's just what I had on production anecdotes. And again, we'll get to some more of the bigger myths later on.
Cool. That sounds great.
So you're telling me it's that time?
Oh, it's that time.
Vibe check.
Here we go, we're checking the vibe. Sounding good and looking real nice. How'd they make that guy unalive? It's better off without CGI. Kissing on point and we're feeling fine. The slow burn is taking its time. Here we go, we're checking the vibe.
You miss all my improvisational songs now that we have actual transition songs.
I do miss them a little bit, but I also really like the transition songs.
It's true. Plus, you get a lot of my freestyles in your regular life.
Oh, I sure do.
Maybe I'll do a compilation someday of all my in-between songs.
One can only hope.
Fingers crossed. All right, let me start with cinematography. Cinematographer on this film was William A. Fraker. He was born on September 29th, 1923 in Los Angeles. He went to USC School of Cinematic Arts, and a lot of career highlights. It spanned a lot of movies. He also was involved with Bullet. He filmed Exorcist 2, The Heretic, which is on our short list. We got to watch that soon. Looking for Mr. Goodbar. Heaven Can Wait. He was the director of photography on 1941, the Steven Spielberg comedy war movie that not many people have watched, at least in our generation. I'm not sure.
I've not heard of it.
He was the cinematographer on The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, War Games with Matthew Broderick, Memoirs of an Invisible Man, not to be confused with the autobiography of an Invisible Man.
Right?
That was a John Carpenter directed film. Fraker filmed Tombstone, Father of the Bride Part 2, The Island of Dr. Moreau, which I saw in the theaters and was not good. Even back then when I was like 13 and pretty much liked every movie I saw that in the theater and I was like, this isn't very good. And he also filmed Vegas Vacation and Rules of Engagement, among many, many other films, but those are some of the most notable ones. And William Fraker later became president of the American Society of Cinematographers, which has a website where I often find interviews and articles. where I get some of this information for Vibe Check. And one of these articles will be in the show notes. I have emailed it to Rachel. Actually, I've opened the email, put the link in the email, and have not clicked send. But I'll do that eventually, in theory.
And if not, comment about it.
Yes, absolutely. Polanski said about William Fraker, Billy was always in a good mood. He had a very good disposition. I've worked with many directors of photography, and they are all so different, but I remember Billy as the gentlest. And in terms of this movie, specifically Rosemary's Baby, is unlike many horror films. There's no gothic shadows in this. There's really not a lot of like shadow work, right?
Yeah, not at all.
No flashy visual tricks, no aggressive visual stylization. Instead, Fraker and Polanski build horror through framing, observation, distance, and obstruction. And this film was shot mainly with 18mm and 25mm lenses, which, according to my research, are wide lenses. They get a wide scope, which allowed Fraker to capture what he called the amazing sets designed by Richard Silbert, who we discussed earlier. And because of the wide lenses, the lighting couldn't be done from the floor. And then the walls of the apartment sets were 20 feet tall. So that meant that the lighting had to be done from overhead on the grid system. And they created this system of extendable lamp supports that they called trombones, which allowed Fraker to attach lamps to the walls themselves and raise and lower his sources so they would be just off camera. One interesting thing I learned is that they wouldn't typically shoot a star like Mia Farrow with wide lenses like this, and when you're doing like a closer shot of their face, at risk of making the face appear bulbous. And on one of the first days of shooting, they were doing one of the hallway scenes, filming Mia Farrow, and they used a 40mm lens, which is a narrower lens. Polanski watched it and insisted that it be shot with the wide lenses because he wanted the apartment and the building to be its own character that enveloped her. So, and I meant to mention that earlier when we were talking about the apartment, is that the apartment and the building itself really are a character, just like we saw in The Shining.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of like low shots of like her feet and her legs that like where she's not fully centered, right? Like it's the apartment itself. Yeah.
In terms of the collaboration between Fraker and Polanski, Fraker spoke highly of Polanski's storytelling instincts. He said that Roman is one of the greatest storytellers I've worked with, and he really knew how to control and lead the audience to make them squirm in their seats. And he used suggestion to do a lot of it. His earlier films, Repulsion and Cul-de-sac, had very little actual violence in them, but they were horrifying. That's part of the trip. And Roman knew how to do that dramatically through the acting and the dialogue. When you're a cinematographer, you have to do it visually with the lighting and the camera. So both of the filmmakers here prioritize visual storytelling, suggestion, and audience participation over explicit explanation, which, really contributes to what is so successful and effective in this movie. They also used sort of a looking around the corner effect, which is a very famous kind of visual concept that was used in this film. Polanski frequently framed scenes so that walls obscured information and doors blocked sight lines and characters disappeared from view. And Fraker was a little bit unsure about this at first, this sort of like obscuring what's in the scene. But he quickly came around, because there's that scene when they first find out that Rosemary's pregnant, right? And Guy invites over Minnie and Roman.
Yes. And
Minnie rushes off to the bedroom to call somebody. Obviously, we know now, probably other coven members, to be like, it's on. The devil baby is upon us or whatever. But she's obscured by the doorway. She's sitting on the bed on the phone. You really can't see the phone. You can kind of see the phone line, and you only see like half of her body. You can't see her face, but you can tell she's on the phone. Fraker didn't understand this choice until they were watching the dailies, sort of the playbacks the next day, and people who hadn't been there for the filming and stuff were literally leaning forward and trying to see around the door at what was happening, and sort
that's cool.
Understood more of the effect that Polanski was going for, and that he basically weaponized curiosity. And it adds obviously to the mysterious, enigmatic vibe surrounding the
Yeah,
story.
like the unknowing.
There's also some interesting information about the rooftop shot at the beginning. So it's, there's that really high up shot showing the Dakota. And I guess I didn't notice it, but I guess you can see Guy and Rosemary sort of approaching the Dakota way down on the sidewalk.
Oh, wow.
I didn't really pick up on that. I'll have to look for it next time. But it required elaborate camera placement and planning. It appears effortless, but the logistics were not. And it was done from the top of a building across from the Dakota. They built a special extended platform that was built off the rooftop to allow the camera to be far enough out to look straight down on the sidewalk below. For the first take, they tied a rope around the camera operator, David Walsh. He crawled out and did the shot. And after he came back from doing the shot, Fraker asked him, "Did you get it?" And Walsh looked at him and said, "I don't know." The height was just too much for him, so he didn't want to reshoot it, especially, the shot at that point is straight down at the sidewalk from way up high. We're talking
just like holding on to the camera.
Like out on a platform extending over, I don't know how far it went out. So then at that point, Fraker tied the rope around himself and did a second take. And when his shot was complete, Polanski asked him if he got it, and he said, "I don't know." So Roman Polanski himself tied the rope around himself.
Bullshit, really?
And took the shot a third time. After Polanski shot the scene, Fraker asked him if he got it, and he said, "Billy, I don't know." And to this day, Fraker said he doesn't know whose take out of those three is in the film.
Oh, that was my next question.
Nobody knows.
That's funny.
You mentioned sort of Rosemary being at the edge of the frame. She is frequently partially obscured, pushed to frame edges, blocked by furniture, hidden by architecture, giving the effect that she appears to be losing ownership of her own life. And that, again, it goes back to sort of the situation and the apartment itself sort of taking over her. You got all the doorways and hallways, the recurring motifs of doorways, corridors, walls, thresholds, these deep shots. I love a deep shot. They reinforce the surveillance, really the lack of privacy and conspiracy. All coming back to what I was saying is the apartment being a character. At first, it's the dream home, right? Still a pretty young couple, exciting, Upper West Side of Manhattan. But it quickly becomes Rosemary's trap, her prison, and the conspiracy machine without ever physically changing. It's not like the Overlook Hotel where the elevator starts bleeding and ghosts are showing up around the corners.
Right. Yeah, no, it doesn't. Even though the apartment is a character, it doesn't change or morph the way that the Overlook does.
And I've talked in the last couple of episodes about color.
I was hoping you were going to bring up color because I have a lot of notes on that.
Well, interesting. You can help me out because I don't have as much, because the film is surprisingly restrained in its use of color. And unlike some other occult horror or other films, there's no dominant color motif throughout. The interesting part really is Rosemary is increasingly photographed as pale, exhausted, and drained, while the Castavets often appear warm, comfortable, visually settled. It creates this subtle imbalance between the two. We're seeing the main character is completely pale, run down, while these neighbors' side characters are much warmer.
There's a lot of white, like as she gets closer and closer to giving birth. Like I have like Guy in white PJs in the white hallway. And when she's like doing well, she's in yellow a lot. Like there's a lot of yellow for Rosemary, right?
Yeah, and I was going to say that like later on, there's a point where there's kind of a montage, right, of them preparing for the baby, like putting the nursery together. And at that point, there's like a lot more kind of neutral nursery colors like creams and soft yellows and comforting tones. But it's also at that point in the film where the audience is beginning to really understand what's going on, slightly ahead of Rosemary. I mean, she understands. I don't think it's fair to say that she doesn't understand, but there's only so much she can prove. But this contrast between these sort of nursery colors, I'll call them, the creams and the soft yellows, against what the audience knows of is a juxtaposition is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. I think that when all of her friends come to visit, when they have the young people party, there's like a ton of color. And I remember, and I wrote that down, that all their young friends are so full of color. And then guy comes in and cuts the scene short, right? And they're noticing her lack of color as she loses herself. There was just a few, and I noted a lot of my favorite shots. The shot where she walks into the kitchen and sees the roses, packing for the hospital, the shot of the pills stuck between the shelves that you can only see if you're coming at it right on, right? I think overall, one of the things I noticed was the rapid cuts between scenes that moves time along really quickly. And we noticed that when we were watching this time. The Exorcist does that too, where there's a quick scene cut. There's no lingering or watching them leave the screen. It's just the scene's over, we're into the next scene. And I don't know if that was just something that was more common then, or it struck me as another similarity between this and The Exorcist.
And with sometimes weeks or sometimes even months, right? Between scenes, without obviously no title card saying 3 months later or anything like that. It would just give you the context within the scene to make you realize that time has passed. And also the appearance of Rosemary is a big indicator as well. One of the biggest achievements in the cinematography of this film is the naturalism. The movie does not look frightening.
Not at all.
Looking ahead 5 years to The Exorcist, there's large portions of that film that are similar, that they don't seem as frightening, but there's always the underlying bedroom, Reagan's bedroom, that becomes more and more evil, which makes it, the fact that it never reaches that in this movie, but it is still so effective, somehow makes it almost more frightening.
I think the closest thing is like the Cassavet's apartment when they're having those parties, right? They have like the New Year's Eve party, and then later on when she goes in to find the baby and they're all just sitting around.
But it's still just comfortable.
But it's still just an apartment. Yeah, like it reminds me a little bit of the Exorcist room, except the Exorcist bedroom there was shadows and stuff. Like this is just, it's the kind of the banality of evil. It's just a bunch of people around a baby.
And it wasn't on this viewing, but I think our previous viewing, or maybe I watched it solo. I can't remember. Maybe we didn't watch it that long ago, right? Before this viewing, like last year at some point?
24. It was 2 years ago.
Is this only the second time you've watched it?
Mm-hmm.
I watched it at some point last year, and I don't get nightmares from movies, but I definitely freaked out in my sleep one time after watching this. It was one of the last times you called me out on being like, I don't like scream, but I like kind of like...
You yell in your sleep sometimes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a moaning yelling, like a... Yeah. Like you're trying to call for me, but like then I go and you're just fast asleep. So
yeah, and I clearly remember I had fallen asleep on the couch as I typically do, and the devil's arm was reaching around the corner for kind of that corner where the hat rack is.
Oh yeah.
And I was reacting to that. So that is the only scary moment in sleep related to a movie I can think of.
So this is the only movie that's given you nightmares.
Yeah, and I don't think it has the most scariest moments for me. But apparently that psychological manipulation got me somehow.
I was thinking about other movies that do this, that are modern, that kind of just build this unrelenting tension, and specifically Speak No Evil, which we've talked a lot about, right? Does that, and a lot of kind of the elevated horror stuff does that with some similar stuff, but except there's no like long lingering weird shots in this. Like it's all very intimate and close. So it's different than I feel like even in Midsommar or Hereditary or even The Shining, which has big long shots. I don't know. I the way that it's shot creates the vibe in a very different way, but it's still this deeply unsettling thing that just builds and builds and builds and builds.
Have we figured out why it's so great yet? I don't know.
I'm not sure if we're there.
Well, that's all I've got on cinematography. What can you tell me?
Not very much. This is going to be kind of a you-heavy section because usually special effects are my area, and I've only got a couple of sentences here because there's really not many special effects. All of it's minimal and deliberate special effects. The most that it goes to is like the devil's claw as he is assaulting her and like a flash of the baby's eyes. The dream sequences are where we really see any of the special effects, and they were all practical effects. And it was all meant to be disorienting and dreamlike and kind of unreal. William Castle apparently pushed for more effects, which doesn't surprise us given what we know about the rest of his
Put a skeleton on a string.
filmography.
I see no skeletons on strings.
Polanski resisted, thank goodness, because that is a big piece of this. I remember the first time we watched it and we ended it and I was like, that was it? Like, why am I so unnerved? Like, there's no, I mean, it's no Night of the Living Dead, right? It's not even The Exorcist had way crazier special effects.
Well, and I know we're talking about special effects, but before I forget, I think it is interesting. The last movie we watched was A Quiet Place, which we noted is very simple.
Yes.
The special effects were not in that, but the story was fairly simple. And this one is fairly simple, right?
Also fairly simple and yet so deep and layered.
And again, and this one is also, which we'll get to more in themes, but it's one of those ones where you're watching and you can question whether or not the protagonist is experiencing the thing she's believing she's experiencing or whether she's cracked in some way.
Right.
What did they do for that devil's claw, or did you not see?
I couldn't even find anything.
Just
every, and there's so many articles written about this movie, but that, you know, there was almost no special effects used. It was just prosthetics, I'm assuming. Yeah. And then I had the bit about the oncoming traffic, but we wasn't sure where to put that in just because it seems like that could be special effects, except it wasn't. It was just real. And then I did note that she actually ate raw chicken liver. That was not fake. For the realness, I don't know. And she's a vegetarian.
Which is weird because we watched Raw last night.
We just watched that movie Raw last night. That's right. And so, you know, commitment to the bit. Another place for special effects that they chose not to use special effects.
I follow this special effects guy on Instagram, and I don't know. I've not really delved deep into what he's worked on necessarily, but he's done several videos on making fake food. That's pretty, like he's done video on raw chicken and showed how he created what looks like raw chicken that is like made out of, I don't know if it was gummy or something.
Oh, yeah.
He does stuff like that, but also other types of special effects. So, but back in the day, 1968, I guess it was just raw chicken livers for you, Mia Farrow.
Raw chicken livers.
Should I take us out of vibe check, talking about music and some sound design?
Yeah, I think so. And I have a few notes on that too, so we can kind of close it out. I'll insert if need be.
All right. So the composer for this film was Krzysztof Komeda, Komeda. He was born in April of 1931 in Poland, and he died at age 37 in 1969. He took a fall, apparently, and had a serious head injury resulting from this fall, and he developed complications leading to his very early death. He died in April 1969, so like a little less than a year after this came out.
Wow.
But up till then, he was a professional jazz pianist and composer. He collaborated with Polanski on several other occasions on Knife in the Water, Cul-de-sac, and The Fearless Vampire Killers. The main theme of this song is called Sleep Safe and Warm. It is a lullaby sung by Mia Farrow. We were right about that. And what's so interesting about that, right, is because lullabies suggest safety, motherhood, comfort, maybe innocence of childhood. But this film transforms that into instead melancholy, dread, and uncertainty. And I do think, to some extent, there are a lot of lullabies that, if you do them the right way, are pretty creepy.
I wrote a lullaby
Oh yeah.
for the older one when I was pregnant with her, and then I've sung it to both of the kids since then. But I suppose it could be creepy.
Like Rockabye Baby.
Rockabye Baby's pretty creepy.
But then having Mia Farrow sing it is a nice extra little touch.
Yeah,
But I
so
think
effective.
The film, I think, is bookended with it. I think it's on the opening credits and the closing credits. Also, side note, those pink opening credits are so interesting. All the credits at the beginning over the skyline.
Oh, yeah. I didn't notice what color they were.
They were like baby pink, and a lot of the music, the music there's not a ton of music in this. I think there's a lot of sequences where it focuses more on the quiet than the music, which very similarly to A Quiet Place adds to that discomfort and dread. But one thing that's interesting in this movie is the apartment wall sound horror. I didn't come up with a clever title for that, but a really smart sound idea. Rosemary, even from the get-go, when they move in, both Rosemary and Guy, and then Rosemary continuously is able to hear voices and movement, chanting, incantations, and conversations through the walls, which has the effect of the lack of privacy and uncertainty and paranoia. So it's like the walls almost become characters because
That's in alignment, yeah, with the apartment. And then I also saw that you hear Für Elise, Beethoven's Für Elise, da 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 da, and I didn't notice this. I read about it, so next time I watch, I want to listen for it. But that you hear that starting at the very beginning, and the playing gets better and better as the movie goes on, kind of marking her pregnancy, which I did not notice, but I read about and thought was really, really cool.
Well, I'm glad you picked up on that because I only really had focused on what he had composed. Obviously, he didn't compose Für Elise.
Right, exactly. But I thought I recognized Für Elise because as a pianist, I, of course, learned how to play that when I was a child. And it's always cool to recognize it. It's one of the most basic things that you learn as a young pianist. And that was always, I was wondering why it was repeating. I noticed it every time it played, but didn't clock that it got better over time, which would be what you would expect from someone practicing so much.
Oh, right. Yeah. I was going to ask, do you have any good, bad neighbors, hear them through the walls stories?
Not really, kind of, except we were the bad neighbors.
We were?
Well, I wasn't. It was when I was going into labor with our second child.
Oh, yeah.
And I went and sat in the bathroom, and the bathroom in our very jerry-rigged apartment building that they had clearly just chopped up this house into apartments, right? So the walls were pretty thin. And so I was kind of doing this vocalizing thing, which is funny because I was thinking about this when we covered A Quiet Place. And it was more like chanting.
I mean, it's kind of like me after watching Rosemary's Baby.
Right?
Listeners, go back and compare that to the sound she made for me when I've
no, that's your sound. But it was much more like it was just like the animals don't like that sound. Anyway, the person living next door to us was friends with my best friend's boyfriend. And so I heard through the grapevine later that he had been really confused by the sounds coming from our bathroom.
He's like, I cannot place what that
like, what are they doing? Because it was probably a good 20 minutes of just vocalizing intensely because I was having a baby. So
that all reminds me of a time the neighbors themselves weren't usually making a ton of noise. They were getting a lot of visits in the building next door, but it did lead to a noise that we heard that tipped us off that something was going on. We all of a sudden... There was like a front sunroom area that was partially your office and partially the girls' beds and stuff.
Yep.
And one day during the summer, one year, we could all of a sudden hear very clearly police walkie-talkie.
That's right.
Police communication. And we realized that there was a policeman in the entryway of our apartment.
Yep.
And because they were staking out and about to break into the...
There was a SWAT team.
Yeah.
Outside.
Yes.
It was not just police. It was SWAT.
Yeah, they had like AR-15s and stuff.
And one of them was in the entryway to our building, which was right below my desk. And so could hear that. And then
We've got that on video somewhere.
we do. I did video it. You were like, get out of there. And I was like, I have to get this.
I was like, what if shooting breaks out?
Have it on video.
Because apparently there was potentially, allegedly, some drug deals going on next door.
Entrepreneurial endeavor.
Entrepreneurial endeavor. Yeah, I've had some interesting neighbors over the years, and I'm sure I've been the interesting neighbor as well. Another thing that they did with the sound design, you had the ongoing urban sound. So New York never disappears. You hear the traffic, the city ambiance, and distant activity. So it's kind of this subconscious reminder. There are millions of people surrounding Rosemary. Nobody helps her, and she's completely isolated. Which is interesting because I lived in New York City for about 2 years, and I did reflect often on the fact that you could be somehow more alone in a city with that many people than you sometimes would be in much more rural areas like where we are. There's also sort of the telephone motif, the phone calls that happen on the old school style phone, which often signaled warnings of some kind, right? Or transference of information or betrayal or interruption of what's currently happening. Because that happens several times. There's phone calls being made, mostly inside their apartment, but also you have that phone booth moment.
Yeah, that monologue.
I thought it was funny that they've got this big apartment, but it seems like they only had the one phone that they would move from room to room. Did you notice that? How Guy would move the phone?
I think that was probably pretty typical when phones were not the centerpiece of life. You know what I mean? And the way he watched TV, I also noticed was weird because it was like he was like right up next to it. Right? It wasn't the center of their world. It was just like in a corner, and he would go sit in front of the TV and watch it, like not the way we have it now, like an altar, basically, like in the center of all of our social interactions.
Because there was that one. I had wondered about, would that work? So that there was one point that Guy answered the phone and brought the phone into the bedroom for Rosemary.
Yep.
Would that phone call still stay connected if you unplugged the phone from the wall and carried the phone into another room and then picked it back up again? I guess maybe if they didn't hang up on the other side.
I think back then they still had switchboards. So as long as the switchboard had the signal open, I think that it would work.
I don't know.
But that's just my guess.
Phone experts listening, comment
Let
below.
us know. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this movie is primarily vibes.
And then the last thing I had on that, yeah, totally. It all contributes to the vibes. There's the final nursery scene where sounds remain remarkably restrained again. There's no giant musical payoff. There's no giant orchestral swell or damning music or demonic, signaling a demonic spectacle. The horror remains very domestic. And it's really in that domesticity where you find the horror. It's like, oh, this is supposed to be so comfortable and great. And the fact that it's not is that juxtaposition, I think, that leads to so much of the discomfort.
Agreed.
But I think that, I know for sure that's the end of Vibe Check. And I think that's the end of part one.
I think so. Yeah. I think we'll wrap up here and then come back with story time next week.
Yeah. So this will be the end of Rosemary's Baby Part 1. Join us next week for Rosemary's Baby Part 2.
Yes, please.
Where we cover story time. We go over the characters, murder, mayhem, and myths, themes, and then, of course, we'll be performing our Rosemary's Baby songs. Say that 10 times fast, Rachel.
Baby songs. Rosemary's Baby songs. Rosemary's Baby songs. Rosemary's Baby songs. Rosemary's Baby songs.
You're so great.
I know.
And the gimmick for these is switched perspective or something like that. Multiple perspective. Something. We'll figure out what that means for each of us when we get there. But until then, where can they find us?
You can find us on all your favorite social media sites at OMNLD
And you can also email us at omnldpod@gmail.com. We'd love to see your comments. and interact with you. You got any questions about my nightmares? I'm happy to answer them. But until next week, we're signing off.
I guess that's it. See ya.
Bye-bye.